Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. As we all know, or I suppose we all know, fall is the season for the worship of the Divine Mother. And so our observance of Navaratri, the 9 nights of Mother, starts next Saturday, October 17th. You may want to chant Jai Shri Durga with us. Swami Sarvadevanandaji has let us know that this year, Navaratri chanting Jai Shri Durga, Jai Shri Durga, Jai Shri Durga will begin next Saturday, October 17th, and continue through Monday, October 26th. If you'd like to join us in this very auspicious effort, please email your pledge to me right away. Let me know how many times you will chant Ma's mantra each day. Let me know how many times you will chant Ma's mantra each day during the Navaratri celebration. Any amount, in addition to whatever other mantra chanting you do each day, is fine. Just for your information, a good rule of thumb is that most people say Jai Shri Durga about 60 times per minute, once per second. By that measure, if you pledge to chant for 10 minutes each day, that equals 600 repetitions a day, or 6,000 for the 10 days. Again, just a point of information, for every 250,000 repetitions, that equals 1 full Durga Puja. So this little congregation itself could generate 250,000 repetitions. Already a number of people have made a pledge, and so please do send in yours, and we'll get started on Saturday, October 17th. By the by, if you miss a day, it's perfectly all right to make up what you missed on the next day or the next several days. If you miss a day and you're doing 5 minutes a day, you could do an extra minute for the next 5 days, for example. Speaking of Durga Puja will be offered in our chapel on Saturday, October 24th. On Saturday, October 24th, from 11 a.m. to noon, Durga Puja will be celebrated in the Center's chapel and live streamed over Zoom. Aditya Chaturvedi will serve as pujari. Unfortunately, due to the virus, there can be no in-person attendance and no lunch following the puja as we normally have. We normally have a prasad lunch after the puja. Unfortunately, we can't do those things this year. The Zoom link for the puja, which is just the Sunday Zoom link, but nevertheless, it'll be in our e-newsletter in the next couple of weeks. and it's always on the center's website. Very importantly, if you would like to sing before, during, or after the puja, please email me about that right away. And just so you'll know, I got an email from India today saying that someone from there, who was referred by their aunt in Chennai, someone from India will be singing for our Durga Puja, and I just think that's splendid. So that's it for the announcements. So just as a quick FYI, October and November will be status quo as far as the chapel and activities here are concerned. According to the medical experts, things are only likely to get more complicated during this next 6 weeks, or perhaps even into December. We'll see. But in any event, no in-person events, everything by Zoom for the rest of October and November at least. So we've done our opening chant. There will be more than one poem, no songs this morning, but there will be more than one poem during the talk. And again, very, very warm welcome to all of you. As we know, October is a month for the study of karma yoga, a spiritual path leading to the abandonment of selfishness. As a karma yogi, you practice offering your actions and their results, as well as your perceptions, thoughts, and feelings to the divine presence. Because as Krishna says in the Gita, those are also actions. So all of your things that we would normally identify as actions and their results, as well as your perceptions, thoughts, and feelings, those are offered to the divine presence. Even before fully knowing this presence, you hold firmly to the belief, as a karma yogi, you hold firmly to the belief that the presence is within each person or other living being that you interact with or serve. Working and abiding in this spirit, you are increasingly able to release attachment to your activities and their results. This leads to the freedom and contentment promised by karma yoga. As Krishna says in chapter 2 of the Gita, even a little practice of this yoga will save you from the terrible wheel of rebirth and death. Now, on another Sunday, we'll talk about why he says that. But this morning's topic is your spark of reverence. In the first act of Shakespeare's Hamlet, the prince laments how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. I'm going to repeat that because it is a foundation for what we're going to talk about. Hamlet says in the first act of the play, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Perhaps you also feel that way at times. I think we all feel that way at times, that life is just wearying, and stale, and flat. These times pass, but sometimes they pass extraordinarily. During such a period of discontent, if you are fortunate, something outside your normal way of life will seize and hold your attention. For one woman, it was a car speeding through a crosswalk, which missed her by less than 6 inches. For another, it was standing on a forest floor among giant sequoia redwood trees, suddenly completely overwhelmed by their age, their majesty, and splendor. Some of those trees are over 2,000 years old. The first woman was barely spared from death. The second offered a new sense of life. For both, it was a life-changing moment, the effects of which lasted for weeks. During those weeks, their gratitude and awe became reverence and an intense desire to penetrate the mystery of what had happened to them. Their strong yearning led them to explanations left to us by the great teachers of religion, and for both of them, a life of spiritual practice. This from a writer and philosopher, Alan Morinus. Awe is the feeling of being overwhelmed by a reality greater than yourself and greater when awe is the feeling of being overwhelmed by a reality greater than yourself and greater than what you encounter in ordinary life. A curtain is drawn back and you are overtaken by a trembling awareness that life is astounding in its reality, vastness, complexity, order, surprise. As I said, that's from Alan Morinus, a writer and philosopher. This morning, we will explore and discuss that mood of reverence and its essential role in the opening, evolution, and glorious completion of a karma yogi's life, which becomes centered in the divine presence. In the Devi Mahatmyam, the Chandi, addressing the Divine Mother, her son Brahma, the creator, says, "Mother, you are pleasing, yea, more pleasing than all the pleasing things, and exceedingly beautiful. And whatever or wherever a thing exists, whatever power all that possesses is yourself." That's from the first hymn in the Chandi, the Devi Mahatmyam. Krishna said to Arjuna, "The supreme Brahman in this body is also known as the witness. It makes all our actions possible and, as it were, sanctions them, experiencing all our experiences. He who has known this witness to be other than Prakriti and the gunas will not be reborn." Each of us, we are told in the scriptures and by the teachings of Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, that witness presence, that Atman, is present in each one of us. It is not Maya. It is not the Maya. Another name for Maya is Shakti, the divine power in manifestation. And the power of that Shakti is expressed through the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So Krishna is saying, he who has known this witness to be other than Prakriti and the gunas, Prakriti is another name for Maya or Shakti. It's the Sankhya word for that aspect of the divine presence. Krishna said, he who has known this witness to be other than Prakriti and the gunas will not be reborn. That is to say, you become immortal. That's from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3. This morning, we will weave these and other texts together and explore how they, along with reverence, are essential for the practice of karma yoga, the abandonment of selfishness or self-centeredness. Here is a poem about Sri Sharada Devi, Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna's wife. She speaks of her own love and devotion and tells us who she truly is. For those who don't know, the name Gadai is used in this. Gadai is Holy Mother's affectionate name for Gadadhar, which was the childhood or boyhood name of Sri Ramakrishna. She refers to him in this poem as Gadai. Others in his adult life addressed him as Ramakrishna. Mother continued to address him as Gadai. So the title of this poem is Picture of Bliss. She lived for years in a room so small she could barely stand. Fish in a pot that hung above her splashed water on her as she slept. No space there for a cot. The floor she sometimes shared with other women was of stone. In spite of all this, she said to her companions, "My heart overflows with a picture of bliss." Years later, she would agree life was hard then. Yes, my legs still ache from sleeping on that damp and chilly floor. And yet, what she remembered best was peeping through a broken bamboo screen to get a glimpse of her beloved Gadai. This, she'd say to her disciples, this alone could fill my heart with a picture of bliss. When she would return from time to time to the little town where she was born in West Bengal, devotees would follow her from the city. Though torn by a wish to be alone, she could not turn them away. They come for this, she'd say, pointing to her heart. We knew she meant her love, that picture of bliss. A famous writer of Calcutta, that drunkard Girish Ghosh, who would become a saint, once visited her village home where she did not wear a veil. "Oh, this can't be," he cried. "That face, your sweet face, your sweet bare face, we have known from boyhood, when in this form you came and pulled me back from death." Laughter poured from her picture of bliss. "What kind of mother are you?" Girish asked. "Your real mother, my child," she said. "Not just the wife of your guru, not a foster mother, not a vague sort of mother, your real mother." He sat for some moments in silence. "Can this be true?" Girish asked at last, and wept the tears that filled his picture of bliss. "What kind of mother are you?" Girish asked. "Your real mother, my child," she said. "Not just the wife of your guru. Not a foster mother, not a vague sort of mother. Your real mother." He sat for some moments in silence. "Can this be true?" Girish asked at last, and wept the tears that filled his picture of bliss. Now, when Mother was speaking to Girish, she was speaking to us all. This is the Divine Mother, the Mother of the universe, the Mother that Brahma is addressing in the first hymn of the Chandi. So where are we going with all this? How does it tie together as a frame of reference for and a foundation on which to practice karma yoga? And here is the truth of the practice of karma yoga. If you practice karma yoga as an idea, as an ethical code, you will in time compromise, you will in time rationalize, you will in time calculate. There must be the component of the divine presence for you to avoid that. For you not to be proud at some point that you got the advantage in some business transaction where you out-negotiated someone. Something analogous to that in your own life. This must be true. You must begin with a spark of reverence, some small feeling of awe for the divine presence, before you can even start to let go of the idea that you are the doer. I'm going to repeat that. You must begin with a spark of reverence, some small feeling of awe for the divine presence, before you can even start to let go of the idea that you are the doer, which is the core of karma yoga. Now, there's no imperative for you to practice karma yoga. This isn't saying you must do this or you can't be alive. That would be nonsense. No, if you choose to practice karma yoga, you must start with this spark, at least a spark of reverence, before you can even begin to let go of the idea that you are the doer. Unless and until you let go of that idea, there is no possibility of grasping what is meant by, and this is from the Chandi, whatever or wherever a thing exists, whatever power all that possesses is yourself. The Chandi tells us in that frame of reference, the Shakti worship, the Divine Mother worship frame of reference. And Krishna tells us in chapter 3 of the Gita that it is a delusion that you are the doer. It is a part of our illusory ignorance. What is true is, and this is from the Chandi, whatever or wherever a thing exists, whatever power all that possesses is the mother. Let's hear a suggestion from Swami Vijnanananda, the last of Sri Ramakrishna's monastic disciples. Whether you invoke the mother or not, she is looking after you all right. But if you really call on her, you will be filled with joy. See how the sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, and the rivers are all in a quiet, meditative mood, as if invoking the mother and thinking of her only. Only man, the greatest of all created beings, is engrossed in material comforts and does not think of her. To invoke the mother with all one's heart is a very joyful experience. My dear brother, my dear brother, my dear sister, there is not the slightest doubt about it. What does it mean to invoke the mother? Thy will be done. Thou art the power. Thou art the doer. Thy will be done. Listen to this from John O'Donohue, an Irish poet and philosopher. What you encounter, recognize or discover depends to a large degree on the quality of your approach. When we approach with reverence, great things decide to approach us. Our real life comes to the surface, and its light awakens the concealed beauty in things. When we walk on the earth with reverence, beauty will decide to trust us. The rushed heart and arrogant mind lack the gentleness and patience to enter that embrace. And when I read this, it made my hair stand on end. This is it's as if he heard Swami Vivekananda say, the macrocosm reflects the microcosm. This is what Vivekananda said. The macrocosm, the divine presence, the universe itself, manifest and unmanifest, reflects the microcosm. So when we live and act from reverence and the humility of saying, thy will be done, our real life comes to the surface and its light awakens the concealed beauty in things. When we walk on the earth with reverence, beauty will decide to trust us. And then its mirror image, the rushed heart and arrogant mind lack the gentleness and patience to enter that embrace. And here's something else from Swami Vivekananda. In the presence of an ever-active providence who notes even the sparrow's fall, how can man attach any importance to his own activities? Will it not be a blasphemy to do so when we know that he is taking care of the minutest things in the world? We have only to stand in awe and reverence before him, saying, thy will be done. So we've had these various readings, these various quotes, underlining and magnifying the importance, the foundational importance of reverence. And it's there in all of us. For some people, they have one of these remarkable experiences that brings it to the fore in in unmistakable terms. But for each of us, if we're attentive, if we're careful, we will find small things that if we allow ourselves, if we don't have a rushed heart and an arrogant mind, if we allow ourselves to be attentive to them, they too are transformative. So how do we escape a rushed heart and an arrogant mind? The answer is given to us in unmistakable terms by Krishna in the Gita, chapter 3. He says, recognize the truth, even if you don't know it yet. Recognize this truth because I'm telling it to you, and hold it as a tentative article of faith, that you are not the doer. That it is the gunas that are doing everything. In other words, the divine power expressed through the gunas that is doing everything. And so, what does he say to do? Offer it all to me. In this way, you escape the rat race of constantly trying to create results, anticipating the results, taking joy in the results, or lamenting that you didn't get the results that you wanted. Sri Krishna says, this is the only way out of that. Offer it all to me. And then there is no karma. Then there is no, all the karma too comes to me, he says. And so you live a life of contentment and tranquility and escape, as Krishna says, from the terrible wheel of rebirth and death. As I said earlier, this does not necessarily apply to you. We never compromise the ideal. We hold the ideal out. But you choose. You choose whether this is for you or not. But do be aware, as Vivekananda points out with absolute precision in his talks on Jnana Yoga, that there is no possibility of practicing karma yoga as simply an ethical system. No possibility. Because inevitably you will keep one foot in the other camp. And doing that, you will inevitably compromise, negotiate and rationalize and calculate. These undermine the whole thing. So when we make the effort, when we make the absolute daily effort to offer ourselves and all that we do and all that we are to the divine presence, we offer our work as worship. We offer our thoughts as products of the gunas, which Krishna says unmistakably that they are. All of this we do as a methodical daily practice. But it cannot happen. It cannot happen unless you have reverence for what it is that you're offering it to. It can't be just an idea. So that spark of reverence, when you feel it, nurture it as you would if you're trying to start a fire out in the wilderness and you've made some wood shavings and you put a match to the wood shavings and they start to burn, and you very gently blow on the little spark of fire that started so that it grows, so that it has more oxygen to burn. All of this is an analogy to your spark of reverence. You nurture it through your attention. And how do you control your attention? You ask yourself, what deserves my attention? If the worldly still deserves your attention and your estimation, well and good. When Sri Ramakrishna was asked by a delegation of gentlemen from Calcutta who had come to ask him about his life of renunciation, they asked him, why? Why should we not enjoy the world? And Sri Ramakrishna replied, go, enjoy the world. I have no objection. But when you are sick of it, return to me. I have the cure. This is one of the ways that we can be cured. By finding that spark of reverence within us and nurturing it so that then we can practice, do the practices of karma yoga with a right goodwill as Vivekananda says, keep on working, the fire will come. So this is the foundational idea of karma yoga, that it is rooted in reverence and awe for the divine presence. We'll conclude with another story about another remember the quote I gave from Vivekananda said, we have only to stand in awe and reverence before him saying, thy will be done. So we'll conclude with another story about that will being done and how a moment's experience offers awe and transformation. This is titled Alligator Poem, and it's by Mary Oliver. Some of you may know her work. She's a prize-winning American poet. I knelt down at the edge of the water, and if the white birds standing in the tops of the trees whistled any warning I didn't understand. I'll start again. I knelt down at the edge of the water, and if the white birds standing in the tops of the trees whistled any warning I didn't understand. I drank up to the very moment it came crashing toward me, its tail flailing like a bundle of swords, slashing the grass, and the inside of its cradle-shaped mouth gaping and rimmed with teeth. And that's how I almost died of foolishness in beautiful Florida, but I didn't. I leaped aside and fell, and it streamed past me, crushing everything in its path as it swept down to the water and threw itself in. And in the end, this isn't a poem about foolishness, but how I rose from the ground and saw the world as if And in the end, this isn't a poem about foolishness, but how I rose from the ground and saw the world as if for the second time, the way it really is. The water, that circle of shattered glass, healed itself with a slow whisper and lay back with the backlit light of polished steel. And the birds in the endless waterfalls of the trees shook open their snowy pleats of their wings and drifted away. While for a keepsake and to steady myself, I reached out. I picked the wildflowers from the grass around me, blue stars and blood-red trumpets on long green stems. For hours in my trembling hands, they glittered like fire. In other words, shone with the divine presence within. She saw as if for the second time the world as it truly is. So this beautiful poem tells us of, again, another transformative experience. I recommend the poetry of Mary Oliver to you. She's quite, she speaks to the heart. She speaks to the heart. It's beautiful work. So now we come to the part of this that is the part that is to be cherished, where we do this together, where we speak from our hearts what questions we may have based on what was said, and or any other questions that you may have that are related to the spiritual path, or any comments that you wish to make about your own experience, your own sense of the reality of what was being spoken about today. So please, we have time. Questions, comments. This is how we study the art of spirituality together. Anyone?
I'll jump in here. I had not heard that Mary Oliver poem before. That is powerful.
It is.
I did wonder why she said, I saw the world as if for the second time as it really is, rather than for the first time.
Well,
as it
my
really
understanding of that is we see it the way it really is in our childhood. And then that, and other poems of hers point to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
That's a wonderful poem.
It is a wonderful. It was sent to me by Jerry Brunner.
Ah.
When he read what we were going to talk about today in the newsletter, he said, "This makes me think of this poem by Mary Oliver." He said, Jerry Brunner is a member of our congregation, for those of you who don't know him. He doesn't come around much anymore, but he's still there with us. Anything else from anyone?
Dr. Shankara?
Yes, Uma, please speak up.
It's so deeply moving what you said about reverence and awe-inspired feeling. And that is so touching, especially when you refer to the microcosm reflected in macrocosm.
Yes.
And that reminds me of the original Sanskrit, in which it says, yatha, where, pinde, inside, in your blood, in your own being, your body, what is here, pinde, tatha, brahmande. So, in the universe. So what is here is reflected there, and what is there is already inside you.
Yes.
And that's so powerful. For example, this may be everybody's experience, but particularly when I go outside and stand on my patio, and there is a huge, beautiful oak tree in my backyard.
Yes.
And as I look up, I just am so much in awe of all the green, beautiful green leaves. And I wonder how that tree is nourishing. I mean, how does it happen that this tree stands there, with all its dignity and all its beautiful leaves, giving us shade and giving us that beautiful, comforting feeling inside. So that kind of reverence and awe is very touching, inspiring, and most of all, humbling. It makes me humble. When I am unhappy, as we all are, sometimes, things don't go right.
Sometimes the world is weary, stale, and flat.
Exactly, stale. And that time, when I look outside and I say, my goodness, how these trees are bearing everything, these storms, the powerful wind, the violent wind, and they're still surviving. And as if telling me that, come on, these too will pass. These too shall pass. And
So this
liberates.
is the root of reverence and awe.
Yes. And
when we contemplate how old that tree is,
yes.
that tree is older than any of us here.
And it will stay when I'm gone.
Yes. And all of the instructions for that tree were in a nut the size of a marble.
Exactly.
And so the tree has flourished,
yes,
as you said,
yes,
and gives not only joy and shade and shelter to you in many ways, but also there are many, many creatures that live in that tree.
Yes, exactly. Birds come, squirrels come, birds come.
Yes.
And beautifully, it just, so my point is that when we are too overpowered by our own little problems, it gives you perspective to put it, in a broader framework.
This is why John O'Donohoe said, if we approach with reverence,
yes,
you're answered by reverence. And the inner beauty of things, the truth of things reveal themselves to you,
right,
as the oak tree has revealed itself to you.
Mm-hmm.
It is a transformative experience. As I said, it doesn't have to be one of these maha things like a car speeding by 6 inches away, or standing among the Sequoia sempervirens in Northern California, or having an alligator nearly eat you up.
Mm-hmm.
It can be something much more, that we could take as part of our everydayness, but when we don't, something magical happens.
And Brother Shankara, not only nature, but when I see somebody who is doing extraordinarily kind act, I mean unselfish act for somebody else, one who is starving, giving or sharing money or whatever they have with others. So even those kind of human beings like Holy Mother, who don't think just of their comfort and their joy, their creature comforts, but they're always happy sharing their love and their kindness.
I cannot recommend highly enough for each of us to just go back and read chapter 3 of the Gita.
Yes.
Don't pause to read the scholarly commentary and all that business. Just read what Krishna said. Just read what Krishna said. It is really strong. And it is really a truth that is transformative. But we cannot practice it until, as he says, we have some understanding of who he is and why he is. Reverence. Anyone else? Somebody's got their mic on and we're getting some feedback.
Brother Shankar, this is Katrina.
Yes, Katrina.
Hi, you mentioned not to act with a rushed heart or an arrogant mind.
Yes.
And to turn, really, it sounds like turn things over to God or the divine and let it do it. So how do you know you're not let's say in the day-to-day, just let's say take a car, for instance, you're wanting to purchase a car.
Mhm.
How do you employ or making sure that you're not acting with an arrogant heart, an arrogant mind or a rushed heart, and you're allowing the divine to do it? You understand my question?
I certainly do, and it's a very practical and good question, Katrina. It is these worldly activities. We cannot make these determinations that you requested, that you've talked about, unless we are practicing spiritually. Then things become clearer to us. We can't simply say, well, these are the principles that were talked about, and don't have a rushed heart and an arrogant mind. How do I not do that? Well, the answer is some period of practice. And it's absolutely essential that we be willing to make mistakes. So you are approaching the idea of buying a car. Many considerations. Which car? Why that car? How much? All these calculations. Well, if you are a practicing karma yogi, you pray in this way: Lord, this must be done. I need a new car. I understand it is not my doing, it is thy doing. So grant me thy guidance. And as Father Thomas Keating says, if you truly trust God, you don't have a care in the world. You will have a sense of what to do, but that you can't do that from a standing start. You have to have practiced for some time. And so, and any time is a good time to start. As I said, read chapter 3 of the Gita and then try to put that into daily practice, what Krishna says to do there. And for that matter, get the PDF when it's put up on the website, get the PDF of this talk and look at all of the quotes and see what guidance there is there for how to proceed as a spiritual practitioner. But there is no simple answer, no straightforward answer to what should I do. The answer is, I will get guidance from within if I am practicing offering myself and all that I am and do to the divine. Swami Sridharananda calls this divinizing your life. He says we start out with the idea I alone. Then reverence comes. And so you think I and thou. After a time, you understand how big that is that you revere and how small you are. So it becomes thou and I. And in the final analysis, you understand that you are part of that thou. And so it's thou alone. From I alone, it ends up as thou alone. And when you are in that state, or even in the state of thou and I, Sri Ramakrishna says you now have a ripe ego, a ripe heart and ripe mind. And so like an expert dancer, you cannot put a foot wrong. And so you'll buy the right car. I'm sorry I couldn't give you an answer that will work before all of that. But
That was perfect. Thank you.
thank you, Katrina. And thank you for that very practical and pertinent question. That's exactly it. How do we make life's decisions? How do we go about life's doing in this context?
Yes, thank you again.
Anyone else?
Brother Shankar?
Yes, Bhagirath. So glad to hear from you.
There are 2 points I wanted to make. Number
Please.
one, when you quoted Shakespeare from Hamlet,
Mm-hmm.
there is also another very apt quotation from Macbeth of
Yes.
Shakespeare, and that illustrates what Shakespeare says there illustrates when the karmas are misfired, misconceived, misdelivered. And therefore, he says in Macbeth, life is a story told by an idiot, full of noise and fury, signifying nothing. Now, as a karma yogi, when I reword the whole process, life is a story when listened by a wise man, is full of poise and no hurry, dignifying everything. So when karmas are misfired, then you will get the formal quotations. When karmas are done with the spirit that you explained today, you will not even feel bad, And the second point I wanted to make was about the mother. Of course, you can go on forever writing about the mother, but there is a recent review of the survivors of the World War. They have been right now about 90 plus years old. And what do they feel about it? It's a very splendid story of human spirit. But one of them illustrates the feelings from a Japanese soldier. He says, when we started the war, we were fighting for the Emperor of Japan. So victory be to Japan. Hail to Japanese king. That's how they started the war.
Mm-hmm.
But when they were dying on the warfield, Mom, where are you?
Mm-hmm.
This mom, which we are talking about, is not gender specific. It is not even species specific. Anyone can be a mother. This is the reason why in the classic play, Shakuntalam by Kalidas, Shakuntala is a mother to every plant in the forest, to every deer in the forest, to the extent that in the morning she will not eat or drink until she has watered all the plants and the trees. This is the eternal motherhood that we are talking about.
Yes.
It is beyond the scope. There's a reason why if a man should not think that I did what I did, a woman should not think that either. Then only she qualifies to become a mother.
Thank you, Bhagirath. Very well said. Very well said. We have to release our idea, man or woman, we have to release our idea that we are the doer. If we are to be released from our karma, if we are to be released from the eternal discontent of feeling that the world is stale, profitless, flat, empty, then the world changes for us. And as John O'Donohoe says, the inner beauty of things reveals itself to us. Especially the inner beauty of other human beings.
Mhm.
Thank you, Bhagirath. Anything else?
That's the reason why Navratri we are celebrating Mother Kali, and that is for 9 nights a year, while Mother Earth is celebrated every day. Every day you are supposed, as soon as you get up from the bed and put your foot on the floor, you thank Mother Earth. And she's called Mother because of her enduring power.
Yes, I thank you, Mother, and I offer this day to you.
Yes.
As Krishna says in the Gita, I offer this day and all it contains to you.
Yes.
Anything else, you wonderful people? Anything else at all?
It's difficult sometimes to feel sincere in the morning when you want to make an offering to God.
Yes, you're right, Aaron. It is difficult. The thing to do is persist through the difficulty and do it anyway. That's what Swami Sarvadevananda told me. I don't know, it must be 20, 25 years ago now. 20 years ago anyway. Just push through the tamas, push through the difficulty. And sincerity comes after long practice of a working faith, not a blind faith, but a working faith that says, the Upanishads tell me this, the Gita tells me this, the Swamis tell me this, my teacher tells me this. I'm going to believe it is true on a tentative basis, like any scientist testing a hypothesis. I'm going to see if it works. But I'm not going to give up after a day or a week or a month or even a year. I'm going to keep doing it until it comes right. That's why I answered the way I did to Katrina. It takes a long time before one has that feeling that it was expressed by Father Thomas Keating shortly before his death. If one truly trusts God, you don't have a care in the world. If you truly trust God, you don't have a care in the world. But this true trust in God is hard won. It's a relationship. Well, Sri Krishna gives us very explicit instructions in chapters 3 through 6 really, on how to develop that relationship. Thanks, Aaron. You're right. It's hard in the morning. It's hard to remember, and sometimes it's hard to do it with a right goodwill.
Brother Shankara, this is Swanya.
Yes.
Talking about awe, and I'm sure Dr. Majumdar can put it more eloquently than I can even think of, but the human body is something that we just cannot but wonder with awe if we ever paid attention. Every single movement, the muscles and the nerves, it has to be so balanced perfectly. I was just doing some work in the kitchen and it just happens automatically. I'm not thinking that, oh, I have to lift my hand this way and I have to move my wrist this way or whatever, and it just happens. So who's doing it?
Well, Sri Krishna says, and the Christian saints and the Sufi saints and the Sanatana Dharma saints all say that it is the Lord, it is the divine presence itself doing it all. But you're absolutely right. If we just contemplate the human body, this incredible action and experience suit, that is the dwelling for our divine presence. It's self-replicating. It's self-repairing. It's as you said, it's self-activating. And where is it? How is it happening? Those people who study the brain and perception, the more they study, the more odd they become. The more they just, they become reverential. You can find some wonderful TED Talks on this particular subject. I don't know if those of you listen much to TED Talks, but just look for TED Talks on the subject of perception, for example. Amazing. And there's a wonderful woman, a PhD, who studies bacteria. And just on the TED search, when you go to the TED Talks things, search for bacterial intelligence or and listen to her talk. It's just, as you said, Swayam, this is an amazing machine we inhabit. And it is cause for awe and reverence. No two ways about it. Anything else? Thank you, Swayam.
Can I ask a
you.
question?
Yes, please, dear.
Okay. If you trust God, there is no care in the world. I deeply want to believe in it. But how do you explain, how do you keep that faith and trust in the face of losing your dear one in a fatal accident on the road? Or that somebody who you really love, a young person, is taken away from you by disease or accident or whatever. It's so hard that time to really keep your faith. Of course you want to, but what is the way? How do you do that?
Let's listen to Rama speaking to Lakshmana. Vashishta, as we know, the sage Vashishta, was Rama's teacher.
Yes.
At some point, for a reason I don't recall, Vashishta lost all his sons.
Mm.
They all died. And he was very distraught, very upset. And Lakshmana said to Rama, Lakshmana was a bit judgmental, if we remember. Lakshmana said to Rama, Rama, here's this Vashishta who told you that the whole world is an illusion and that all of this is nothing but a vibration of consciousness. And here he is weeping and wailing over the loss of his sons. What's going on here? And Rama said, oh, my brother, you must remember, he who has wisdom also has ignorance. And it's inevitable, even the illumined, still embodied, are in the world of duality and illusion. And so we don't see clearly what happens when a person escapes their cage of flesh and bone. We don't see the glory of that. So Sri Ramakrishna, he lost his elder brother. Of course, he had two reactions. He was glad that Ram Kumar had escaped the cage of flesh and bone and was free, but he also wept for the loss of his elder brother. The same thing happened with other near and dear with Sri Ramakrishna, his own mother, for example. So we're not it is not wrong in any way to have an emotional reaction to the loss of a loved one, particularly someone who's been very dear to us, who was young and still had their whole life to live.
Yes.
You know, we have no idea what the karma is. We just don't know. Anyone who thinks they can tell you they understand karma is just whistling in the dark. You know? They don't know. We can understand the principles of karma, but their application, far too complex. Far too complex. So, but what does the Sthita Prajna do? What does the seer, the illumined soul do? They regain their center. And they see clearly the other side. That anyone who has lost their life has lost only a garment. And Sri Krishna explains it with such clarity in chapter 2 of the Gita. He says, you're just casting off a garment. You don't know why that garment was no longer useful to you. So when you die, when you seem to die, you're just losing that garment. As Sri Ramakrishna said, pointing to his own body, he said, just a pillowcase. Though at the end of his life, it was a very painful pillowcase indeed.
Brother Shankar,
Yes, Bhagirath.
I understand that this is a complex question which Uma asked and you were summing up. But there is one more way of looking at it.
Yes, dear.
That we have William Boyd, who was a Canadian pathologist, but a poet pathologist. And he says, after practicing pathology for 30 plus years, I'm not surprised that the human bodies get diseases, but it does surprise me human bodies do not get diseases.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are flowing, we are swimming in an ocean of such harming substances around, and still we survive. That's the reason why, if we are disappointed that somebody died, we also need to celebrate so many people did not die.
Yes.
And they were allowed to live the full scope of life to do what they want to. And if they do not use it well, it is their problem. It's not God's problem.
No.
That is why the last poem that you read reminded me, I think it is T.S. Eliot, which simplified the whole journey of life is going from point A to point B, come back to the point A and see it for the first time.
Yes, T.S. Eliot.
T.S. Eliot. Because our sensory experiences, they have to be repeated in order to gather the wisdom out of that one.
Yes.
The first experience is seemingly meaningless, but the meaning deepens as we are re-exposed to it over and over again and contemplate over it.
Yes. Absolutely. And what you said about swimming in a sea, swimming in a sea of pathogens, swimming in a sea of things that could kill us, and yet we don't die. This has been very much brought home to me over the last 8 months. And it's actually difficult not to become a germaphobe.
Oh.
It's actually difficult to keep fighting off the impulse to be neurotic and excessive about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. You know, Howard Hughes, the great inventor and
Yeah.
wild man, he became a total germaphobe toward the middle and end of his life. There's all kinds of ways to become unbalanced. And so we have to just trust. We have to just trust. This is happening for reasons I cannot begin to understand. Tat Sat.
I like that. Just trust. 2 words, but so powerful. Just trust.
Yes. Well, it's a little bit after noon. So many people have stayed. How sweet. Anything else from anyone? We can stay as long as you like. We can talk as long as you like.
I wanted to add something, some thoughts that I had.
Yes, Marla, dear.
My first little one was about the awe. One of my students this last week had brought me, when we're outside playing, she brought me this tiny, tiny little snail. It was the tiniest snail I have ever seen.
Oh,
And she set it down on the chair next to me and immediately popped out and started crawling along. And I felt such awe that such a tiny, delicate little thing can survive in this world. So just like you were talking about, that it's amazing that things live, you know, that's an amazing thing too. And another thought I had was about the selfishness, because the minute you started talking about, you know, we have to learn to abandon selfishness, I had to start thinking, what is selfishness? And, you know, and talking about mothers are always taught, you must give everything. And so many women are taught to give to such an extent that they no longer take care of themselves. And that's where I felt like the idea of the witness, the observer comes in, that you step aside. This body is my sacred vehicle given to me in this lifetime. Just as I am taking care of everyone else, I have to give devotion and care, you know, to this person as well too, and not putting it in a hierarchy where I'm the top of the pyramid. No, I have to be in the middle of the ecosystem and be a part of the ecosystem and take care of myself and everyone else, you know, as part of my devotion and as part of my mission in life.
very good.
Yes, very good. And I share your awe at those tiny creatures. It is awesome. Swami Vivekananda also was one who was in great awe of these tiny creatures in there, and the fact that they are consciousness made concrete in these tiny ways. And what you said about mothers, you know, it's just a truth. And Haima could tell us a great deal about this. You cannot be strong for others unless you are strong yourself. Your attempts to be strong for others will be compromised and flawed if you are not strong yourself. And it's so interesting that this forester in British Columbia discovered what actually happens in a grove of trees. There's a mother tree that is monitoring and nurturing and encouraging the other trees to help one another and offer one another nutrients and antipathogens and all kinds of things. That mother tree is the biggest and strongest tree.
Wow.
You can again find her talk. She did a wonderful TED talk. Just look in the TED talk search window, Forester, British Columbia. It's only about a 20-minute talk, and it will leave you in tears about what's actually going on with trees, and it'll leave you in tears about the tragedy of clear cutting. What happens when they just butcher a whole grove or forest of trees. So thank you, Marla. Those are the two very, you're so right. You must be strong yourself before you can be strong for others.
Brother Shankara, it's Michael from Athens.
Hello there, Babaji.
I was watching a documentary on hummingbirds last night, and at rest, their hearts beat 400 beats per minute.
Whoa.
In flight, 1,200 beats per minute.
It doesn't even seem possible, does it?
Overnight, they lower everything 40 beats per minute overnight. It's actually, each night is a near-death experience for them, because some of them don't actually wake up in the morning, but they go through this whole process to wake up in the morning. And the thing that I wanted to tie into, besides the tiny creature connection, is that when they go down to the southern coast, the Gulf Coast of the United States, in 3 days, they can double their size before they fly across the Gulf of Mexico to Central and South America. And it reminded me of Hanuman as he's sitting there contemplating the 900-mile journey over to Sri Lanka. And he, you know, he increases in his size the same way that, and the hummingbirds do the same thing. And also the iridescent colors that we see in them are not colors like everything else is colored in nature. It's air bubbles that are inside the feathers that give different shades, and they can actually adjust those air bubbles so they can appear as they can camouflage for predators, and then they can turn their bubbles another way and intimidate those that they're trying to scare off from the food supply. And it's just amazing that they're the tiniest little things, and they're pollinators. They're actually the messengers of the plants. They carry pollen from plant to plant, which is the messages. The plants do the same thing the trees you were describing. There's this whole interconnection. The hummingbirds do it through the air, and then through the roots and the mitochondria in the soil is the way the plants and the trees all communicate with each other through Mother Earth that way. And it's just to not be in awe of Mother Nature is just to have both eyes closed for me. And it's one of the gifts of living out on the farm and waking up and hearing the geese in the morning, and you know, the hawks when they bring something back to the nest, and you know, we have a bobcat with 3 cubs on the somewhere nearby that passes through every once in a while. So yeah, Mother Nature is endlessly fascinating when I let go and focus on her, because there are no mistakes in nature.
Well, as you say, she is awesome beyond all measure. And there's things that you described about hummingbirds. Wow, I'm going to have to find that documentary. That's really so. But you know that this is one of the things that Pim van Lommel, Pimvanlommel, Pim van Lommel found. He's a scientist. He started out as a cardiologist, remained a cardiologist, but he expanded his scope of effort to science, studying consciousness. And what he came to the conclusion, and it wasn't just a hypothesis, he proved it, that consciousness is not confined to the form. It's not. First of all, there's an etheric egg, if you will, around each living being that is the transceiver, the real transceiver for consciousness. He proved this. You can find his book, Pim van Lommel. And then he found that consciousness is, which of course was also said by such as Einstein and Schrodinger and other quantum physicists, consciousness is non-local. Swami Yogeshananda put it this way: consciousness is, what does he say? Well, what he said is, it's not plural.
Yeah.
There's only one. And even saying one implies two. So what he said, that consciousness is, he said consciousness is primary and not plural. And so these forms that we can see are the products of our memories. It says that so clearly. in the Devi Mahatmya. We see name and form because Mother is memory herself. She is herself the memory of name and form, which is, we are endowed with her consciousness, whatever or wherever a thing exists. It is her herself. So thank you, Babaji. That was good. I want to find that documentary on hummingbirds. Anyone
Shankara,
else? Yes, please, Lori.
I just wanted to mention the amazing book, The Hidden Life of Trees,
Ah,
that you mentioned about the mother tree. It's an incredible book. I've just read a little bit of it, but it's amazing.
yes.
And then also, I wonder, Shankara, can you tell us where you got that quote from John O'Donohue?
Oh, I think Jerry sent it to me some time ago, to tell you the truth. I think
I'll ask him.
I think it's from Anamkara.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, it's from his book Anamkara.
Or beauty, maybe, too. So.
Could be, I don't know. In any case, I believe that your lovely husband sent it to me some time ago.
Okay. Thank you
Mhm.
so much.
You bet. Thank you. Anyone else, dears? You know, I was once riding in a car with Swami Sridharananda. This just goes to show you the breadth and depth of a holy man, a true illumined soul. We were riding along and we were on Highway 1 in Big Sur, which is only 2 lanes wide at that point, 1 lane each direction. And up behind us came a rider on one of those big Harley Davidson motorcycles. And when it was auspicious to do so, the Harley Davidson rider passed us. And as they do when they do that, you know, they give you a little extra blast with the
Yes.
And the Swami leaned back in his head and he said, "Ah, what a manly sound." And it really took me aback at first. But he meant it right down to the ground. Ah, what a manly sound. So consciousness is. It's primary, it's not plural. It expresses itself in these endless ways. He was reverential even toward this blast from a motorcycle going past. Ah, what a manly sound. The more I thought about it, the more impressive it became. So we can find this reason for reverence all around us. Swayam pointed out the body. Yes. Babaji, hummingbirds. Yes. Bhagavad, pathogens, and the fact that we don't all die immediately swimming as we do in this sea of pathogens. Because we have this incredible immune system. You talk about warfare. This bacteriologist that I mentioned, that you can find her TED Talk, she talks about what's going on in this body all the time. Warfare externally is no news to what's going on inside us.
Yeah.
It's constant warfare. And vigorous. Again, reason for awe, reason for reverence, that our body is doing that completely unbeknownst to us. I mean, we may get an indication from time to time because our fever rises. But that's just one little indication of what's going on all the time. That means that things have gotten a little more serious.
Brother Shankar,
Yes, dear.
that way, from a Vedantic standpoint, it is our failure that we cannot give reverence to coronavirus. It survives in spite of everyone hating. It travels from any part of the world to any part of the world without any visa or plane or anything like that one. You are washing your hands 20 times a day, still it survives. It knows exactly which part of the body to enter and thrive there. It is amazing.
Yes, the American Vedanta 77 was just recently published. There were two things specifically directed toward the coronavirus. One was written by your wife, as you know, which threw down the gauntlets about the coronavirus, saying we don't need to let it intimidate us. Let us approach it from a spiritual point of view. And a beautiful short article. Another was a poem by someone, I believe in India, I've forgotten just where. He may live in British Columbia, but in Canada. But an Indian gentleman, and it's called Ode to COVID-19. And it is, as you pointed out, it is reverential. And there's another poem in there called Return, O Return from the Undying Lands that alludes to the fact that Mother has come, and also the opening, which salutes Ambika. The Mother multiplying your own form into many. There's reason to think that this is the opening of a new chapter of the Chandi, of the Deviman. Another cleansing, another great correction. And it's unavoidable. It's absolutely unavoidable when you see how people are behaving in the face of it. Some people are being defiant, and not in a positive way as Uma's article was, but in the most self-willed ways. You cannot help but think of Christ's remark, "The meek shall inherit the earth." Understanding that meek does not mean crawling on your knees. Meek is a word that refers in Aramaic, the word meek, as translated from the Aramaic, refers to a particular kind of horse that has the temperament and the training to behave appropriately in the most dire circumstances. That is a meek horse, and that is exactly, and Christ's audience would have understood what he meant. They would have understood the referent. That is a meek horse. The meek shall inherit the earth. And the second is what Darwin really said. Disraeli and the British Parliament twisted the text, as Vivekananda said. I mean, he didn't say it about this in particular, but tortured the text. What Darwin was reputed to have said was those who are the fittest shall survive. That's not what he said at all. He said those who are fit to survive are those who are most adaptable. That's what he really said. That's what the Latin that he wrote says. When it was translated by Disraeli and the ministers of the British Parliament of the time, they tortured the text to say survival of the fittest, which was their justification, they being the fittest, for their empire and for their empire building and sustaining the empire. And it led to social Darwinism, which was a horror, a true horror. So Darwin did not say the survival of the fittest. He said those who are fit to survive are those who are most adaptable. And he gave examples about bird beaks and bird feet and all kinds of things that showed exactly what he meant. And astoundingly, Babaji, Michael Moore, was telling us about the hummingbirds that clearly have evolved a great adaptability mechanism, even in the moment, going from 1,200 beats a minute to 40. My God.
Wow. Amazing.
Anything else, dears? I mean, this is a lovely conversation, and I'm willing to keep going on as long as anyone else wants to stay. But if we've finished, then we'll say goodbye. Anything else?
This is Beverly.
Yes,
and
hello, Beverly.
I wanted to say that other than standing among the redwood trees, which will make anyone reverential,
Mm-hmm.
to hold a baby has got to be
Yeah.
the most loving thing to bring you to God.
Yes, yes,
Yes, indeed.
yes.
Absolutely. Yes, nothing is more amazing to me than the tiny hands and feet of a newborn. I mean, the fact that there's a tiny heart inside,
Yeah.
a tiny brain, and it's all like the acorn seed. All the instructions are there
Yeah.
for a full-blown human being. Thank you, Beverly.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, dear.
Yeah, hi. So I wanted to add something about what you said about Darwin.
Mm-hmm.
And the word fit, when we think of the word fit, we think of somebody who's maybe bigger or maybe more healthier, or, it's different. But the word fit in biology actually means to have an adaptation that is suited to the environment at that time. So in fact, you can have adaptation for living in the cold, but if it becomes warm, you're no longer fit. But if you're adapted to being in a warm place and it becomes, vice versa, then you don't have that adaptation. So so you're not fit anymore.
Yes, but as Darwin was pointing out, and he used the example, as we know, of birds, he studied those very carefully, that they were fit in the context that you mentioned because they were adaptable. They did adapt quickly to changing circumstances. And it's interesting, right now, in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California, there are some very sophisticated scientific studies going on about the flora and fauna that is moving upslope as it becomes too warm at the lower elevations where they have lived. They're moving upslope. They're adapting by moving upslope, which means they have to change their food source, perhaps, because their food source may not be moving upslope. And I'm talking about moving up 2,000 feet, not moving up 200 feet or 500 feet, moving up 2,000 feet to where the temperature zone is congenial to them. But they're having to adapt to habitat, and a different habitat. Different trees grow at that level, but some of the plants are also moving upslope. It's very interesting. I get a little newspaper called the it's called the Mountain Messenger, which is published in Downeyville, California, in the Sierra Nevada, and. So there's some information about that in the Mountain Messenger. Mark Twain used to write for the Mountain Messenger. Anything else from anyone? All right, dears. What a wonderful conversation. This is the way we do this together. This is the way we bind ourselves together as a sangha, as a congregation. and share ourselves with one another. It's lovely. So let there be peace in outer space. Let there be peace in the sky, on the earth, and in the waters. Let there be peace in the herbs, the plants, and the trees. May the gods be peaceful. May the whole universe be pervaded by peace. Let that infinite universal peace prevail throughout my being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Hari Om Tat Sat. So, can't say this to you in the parking lot, but I will say it to you here. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May you go in Mother's loving and protective embrace. May you be safe, healthy, and cheerful in this dreadful time. And see you the next time. We have the Monday evening reading and discussion group of the book Love Poems from God. Tuesday, of course, we're studying the life of Holy Mother, Swami Chaitanananda's book on her. Wednesday, we finished, for the time being, the Gita and have taken up Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. We're just started, so please jump in, no prerequisites. And then on Saturday, we'll have our class on the collection of Swami Prabhavananda's lectures called Realizing God. And next Sunday's talk will be on the significance of mother worship according to Swami Swahananda. Today we heard from Swami Vijnanananda, who was a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Swahananda was Vijnanananda's disciple. And it was Swami Swahananda who blessedly sent me here. So I'm very familiar with Swami Swahananda's thinking on the significance of mother worship, which is what we'll talk about next Sunday. And then, of course, the following Saturday, I'm sorry, is the puja. So anything else from anyone before we say goodbye? All right, dears. May the rest of your day be joyous and may you have peace of mind.
Thank you.
Bye-bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, dears.